In today's video, we're calculating our macros. Welcome to the video, guys. My name is Tyler, also known as the Fit Chemist. If you don't know who I am or what I do, go ahead and watch the very first YouTube video that I ever posted. It's an about me, an introduction, but essentially what I do is I help people take control of their lives by taking control of their fitness and nutrition habits. So today we're going to continue with part 4 of the How to Diet series. In parts 1 through 3, we went over the components of our metabolism, how to find our total daily energy expenditure, and then how many calories we should be eating on a daily basis to lose weight. So again, if you haven't seen those, pause the video right now, go back and watch those, and then come back to this one. Honestly, after watching all 3 of those videos, you might be thinking, well, this is all I need to know. Thanks, Tyler, but not so fast. Today we're going to talk about macronutrients and how we can optimize them to preserve lean body mass as we diet, because it takes a while to put muscle on, right? We want to keep this. With that, let's get into it. Let's start with what a macronutrient is. A macronutrient is essentially just a food that needs to be consumed in large quantities in your diet. So there are 3 macronutrients that we need to be aware of: protein, carbs, and fats. So proteins and carbs are responsible for 4 calories per gram, and fats are a little bit more calorically dense at 9 calories per gram. So we used some of those values in the previous calculations and other videos, but today we're going to figure out how we can use those values to calculate our macros and total that up to the amount of calories that we need to be eating on a daily basis. So of the 3 macronutrients, I would argue that protein is by far the most important macronutrient. That's for a couple of reasons, right? 1, it helps us build muscle and retain muscle in the diet, but 2, unlike carbs and fats, our body cannot store amino acids long term. So for carbohydrates, you can think of glucose or glycogen. Think of someone carbing up before a big race. You're supplying energy to your body before that race. And then something like adipose tissue, right? If we're losing fat or burning fat on our body, that's another way of generating energy. So we're breaking down the fat, turn into energy through oxidation. So protein, we don't necessarily have a storage unit for that. So it's so important to eat enough protein each and every single day. So before we calculate our macros, what I first want to do is just look at an example of a food label from the Flexible Dieting Lifestyle. And I don't know what this is from. It could be made up, but let's just play along. We're going to say it's, peanut butter pretzels. So if we look at the top, we have calories, right? There's 240 calories per serving in this particular label. And if we look at the grams of fat, there are 8 grams of fat. So based on what we just learned, we would multiply that by 9 calories per gram to get 72 calories. Same thing if we go down to carbs, we have 37 grams of carbs times 4 calories per gram, and that would give us 148 calories for carbs. And then last one would be protein. So we have 5 grams of protein, multiply that by 4, and we would get 20 calories. Then we go ahead and add all those values up, and that's how you get to 240 calories. One thing I want to point out is that looking at a food label is just an awesome skill to have. So congratulations, you've just acquired that skill. You now know how to look at a food label, read the different macronutrients, and see what is in that food. Now that we know how to calculate our calories from the macronutrients, that is going to be the most accurate way that we can do this, because sometimes there are rounding errors when it comes to calories on food labels. So if you're tracking your macros, then you could just calculate the amount of calories from those macros, and that's going to be the most accurate way to do that. You might be thinking, well, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, if you're using any sort of standard tracking app like MyFitnessPal is what I prefer, if you're tracking your calories and especially using that scanner function, all the macros are put in there for you. You just go to the nutrition section, scroll down, and you'll see those. So you're basically already tracking them, and you probably just didn't know it. All right, guys. Now that we know how to calculate our calories from macronutrients, we can go ahead and set our own macronutrient values. We're going to start with protein because, again, I think that's by far the most important one to take care of. So let's look at a couple recommendations. If we start with this table from one of Layne Norton textbooks, I'll link that down below. But if we look, we can see that protein requirements actually increase in a calorie deficit, and they also increase with age. So if you're someone who's older and you're dieting, your protein demands are going to be much higher than someone who's younger and who's not dieting. Furthermore, if we look at a paper published by Aragon and Brad Schoenfeld, they found that a protein intake of 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight was enough to promote muscle growth in drug-free resistance trainees. So that equates to about 0.7 to 1.0 grams per pound. So from there, we can sort of figure out what our protein intake is going to be. So let's look at an example on the board. Let's say we have an individual who went through my other videos and they found that they need to eat 3,200 calories to lose weight. So we can put that at the top here. And then let's say they decide on 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight and they're 200 pounds. So we would multiply 200 times 4 to get 800 calories from protein. And then what we need to do is subtract that value from the total amount of calories that we need to eat. So we do that and we would get 2,400 calories. And before we do that, we need to decide on a ratio of carbs and fats. So I personally prefer a 70-30 split, but if you're doing something like a keto diet, you'd have somewhere between 0 and 10% carbs, or this is all personal preference, up to you, decide whatever you want. For this example, we're gonna go with 70-30. So let's split that. We can multiply the top one by 0.7. That gives us 1680 calories. And then to find out how many carbs we need to eat, we would divide that by 4. And that would give us 420 grams of carbs. And then we have 30% from fat. So we'd multiply this by 0.3. That gives us 720 calories. And to find out how many fat we need to eat, we just divide that by 9. And then that will give us 80 grams of fat. So our macros are going to be 200 protein, 420 carb, and 80 fat. So if you go through and you use these values like we did in that food label example, this will total up to 3,200 calories. So this individual should target those macronutrients every day to lose weight and optimize muscle retention. So now that we've figured out how to calculate our macros, I want to go ahead and answer some frequently asked questions. No, absolutely not. I would say do not invest a lot of time in trying to hit your macros perfectly. I think that's going to lead to some really weird behavioral issues, and I've heard of people weighing out 8 grams of peanut butter and eating a third of a rice cake just to hit the numbers. It's our bodies are way more complex than that, so I would say as long as you have a good weekly average and you're close to your targets, you should be fine. If you go over on one macro, again, this is not the end of the world. Averages are more important, so you can think of it sort of like an allowance. Let's say you go over 20 grams of carb one day and then the next day you're 20 grams of carb under, you'd still be on track for that average. So really, do not beat yourself up over trying to hit those numbers perfectly. Absolutely, you can save macros. So we just talked about it, kind of thinking about it as an allowance, and I think it's totally fine to do that. So if you're someone who likes to go out on the weekends and have a little bit more food with friends and family or whatever, you can sort of save some of your macros during the week and then use them on the weekends. Again, the weekly average is going to be the most important thing. So if you want 5 low days during the week and then 2 higher days and it averages out, by all means go for it. Or if you're someone like me who I just want to eat the same amount every day, personal preference, so make your pick. I would say carbs and fats are interchangeable to a degree. I don't think it's a good thing to eat 70% of carbs one day and then the next day you're basically going keto and having 10% carbs. But if those values are sort of flipping around a little bit, and as long as your protein and total calories are fine, I'd say there's not really much to worry about. So I would say the biggest mistake is not being honest with yourself and tracking everything that you're eating. If you go to the kitchen and you start snacking on some almonds or something, whatever it is throughout the day, that can actually total up to a pretty significant amount of calories. So be honest with yourself, track everything that you're eating. Same thing for liquids, right? If you're drinking things besides water, it probably has a calorie value associated with it. So keep that in mind. And also, I would recommend buying a food scale. I think they're $15 to $20 on Amazon, and that is the most accurate way to track things because you can weigh it, and on a food label you'll see how many calories per gram of that particular food. It's just the easiest way to go about it. And also, I think it's a bonus because think about weighing out peanut butter. You don't have to dirty another dish, right? You can just take a spoon and basically take peanut butter out of that. It'll tell you how much you took, and you don't have to measure out a third of a cup and then have to wash that later. I don't know, that's just personal preference, but honestly, I would recommend buying a food scale. It's worth the investment. Yes, you can totally track macros and still eat out at restaurants. So I think the biggest thing with that would be planning ahead. So, if you're going on a date night or something, talk about where you want to go, have a plan of where you're going, maybe take a look at the menu ahead of time and see what some popular options are, what the calories are. And if you go on an app like MyFitnessPal, they'll usually do a pretty good job of covering most main restaurants. So as long as you kind of like plan that out, you should be fine. But even if you don't, you can order something that's similar to that or guesstimate the macros. Or at the worst case scenario, let's say you don't track one meal out of however many you're eating throughout the week. It's really not the end of the world, guys. Like, these are recommendations for you to be eating. As long as you don't go out like in an all-out binge fest, you're not gonna ruin your progress. Absolutely not. You do not need to track macros for life, although I will say after tracking for an extended period of time, you do get pretty good at eyeballing portion sizes, so you'll start to recognize like how many calories and macros are in certain types of foods. So, you know, that might forever change the way that you view foods, but you definitely don't need to track for the entirety of your life. There's definitely a lot of people that they'll track macros for, I don't know, an extended period of time, then they'll switch over to intuitive eating and they have a really good time at maintaining or gaining or losing weight just because they can sort of eyeball things. So again, tracking macros is just a tool to help you get to your goal. So personally, I track macros. I'm a data nerd. I just like seeing how many calories and macros I'm eating, and I can very easily adjust things based on my goals, but it's not something that you have to do. Again, it's all preference. If you guys have any other questions about tracking calories, macros, food scales, whatever it may be, let me know down in the comments below and I'd be happy to answer those. Friendly reminder, guys, that as is the case with every how to diet video I've posted so far, I've created a spreadsheet that will do all these calculations for you. That is linked down below, so go ahead, download that. All you have to do is put in a couple values and it'll spit out your macros for you. So no need to do it by hand if you don't want to. So again, link down below. Go ahead, download that and check it out. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up and comment down below and let me know. And again, if you are someone who enjoys taking control of every aspect of your life, and we're going to start that with our fitness and nutrition habits, then do hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bells on so you don't miss a video. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.